Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for our live from our virtual expo for our Solution Spotlight. The CEA team at Griffin works closely with our supplier partners to bring on-point solutions to our grower customers to help them solve their everyday problems. We're looking for things to help you do your daily work more easily and produce an even better crop as you go through each cycle. Today we're going to be hearing about tips for nematode application. We have 4 different people with us today. We have Neil Bassinet. Neil is our CEA sales rep serving Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. He works with both cannabis cultivation and hydro stores. We have Erica Hernandez, our CEA GGS Pro specialist. We have Jose Rodriguez from Dilution Solutions, and we have Nick Bertoni from Bioline AgriSciences. Neil, how about you get us rolling?
Great. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you for the introduction here. I appreciate Nick, Jose, and Erica joining everyone today. I call on a variety of different types of customers, and one thing that's common across all of them is having issues with fungus gnats and thrips. And typically when I reach out to our tech department, GGS Pro, they recommend nematodes as the control measure for these crops. Erica, this is for you. Why is nematodes the #1 thing that's recommended to kind of help get these pests under control?
Well, that's a great question, Neil. So let's start off by talking about the life cycle of these pests. So thrips and fungus gnats both have a media or soil level life stage. The fungus gnat larva and the thrips pupa both dwell in the top inch or 2 inches of your media. So knowing that that's where they live, that's where we're going to want to target our treatments. So this is where nematodes really come into play here. Since they're typically applied as a drench, we're attacking these pests where they live. So how do these nematodes actually work? Well, I've got a picture of the nematode life cycle and some interesting things to show here. With our beneficial nematodes, as you can see in the middle here, what happens is once the nematodes are in the soil or media, they'll move through the water that's been drenched in and seek out their pest victims. And what happens is they enter into the pest through any openings that they have access to at all, or even really thin areas of cuticle or the outer shell of our pests. And they start producing these beneficial to the nematode bacteria. And these bacteria actually release toxins, and this ends up killing the pest from the inside out. Then the nematodes will feed on the bacteria and feed on the decaying pest and reproduce and reproduce and reproduce until eventually they burst back out and go seek out more pests. So with nematode applications, we do see effects pretty quickly, especially with fungus gnats. You'll start to see a decline in population within days to a week. So very effective. But what we want to keep in mind for that is you got to make sure you pick the right species. There are a couple of different species that horticultural growers will use. But for fungus gnats and thrips, what we recommend is Steinernema feltiae. Now it's a long Latin name, can be difficult to remember. Just remember SF nematodes, and that's typically enough to find you the right products there. So I've talked a little bit about how nematodes work. Maybe Nick can tell us a little bit about how to keep them healthy and effective for our treatments.
Thanks, Erica. Absolutely. So there's a few things that nematodes need and are sensitive to in order to make sure that you get the highest level of efficacy out of them. So 2 things that they need are water as well as good oxygen pockets. So they need water because they use water as their main form of locomotion, but they still breathe. So just putting them in a completely saturated environment is not necessarily optimal. So it's about having that balance between the water application as well as the oxygen pockets that are available to them. So typically slightly below water holding capacity in the growing medium that you're using, because they'll use the water to move around to get to the pest that you're targeting. And then they'll use those small little oxygen pockets to breathe. So what's important with that is that when applying, sometimes the mistake is made where it's just the nematodes that are applied and that's it. But what's really important is, because Erica mentioned the top 2 inches where they're residing and moving most within that growth medium, making sure that that is drenched enough is important. So typically using some water applications before, and then the nematodes, and then typically some water applications afterwards. Another thing that's important to keep in mind with nematodes is that they're very UV sensitive. So typically applying in the morning or in the evening is best, because that'll be the lower UV areas or UV UV times during the day.
All right, great. Thank you, Nick. So now we know how they work, you know how they're going to stay alive to do their job. Jose, maybe you can tell us about the type of equipment that growers might need to actually complete these applications and what they can do to make them totally effective.
Sure. I guess from both of your comments, it's very obvious here that we are trying to get the most amount of nematodes alive in the right place, correct? So we need to use an application method that will not basically kill them, but actually deliver them where we need them. So the important thing is we're going to prepare a concentrate and we're going to inject it into the irrigation. Now, these type of applications in the dosatron is our injector. Our injectors are water power. Basically the action of the injector going up and down in a cylinder that you see on this slide, going up and down, is the one that is actually doing the effort of pulling from underneath the concentrate where the nematodes will be. So you prepare a 5-gallon bucket with nematodes and you inject it at a certain rate, typically 1 to 100. That water passes the dosatron, and there's a lot of studies that prove that the survival rate of these nematodes is pretty high on these type of injectors. The other consideration we need to have is that in a typical dosatron injector application, we have in the pickup tube, we have a filter or a food filter to avoid having particles going through the dosatron. In this case, we remove that filter. We don't want any orifice larger than, smaller than 1 millimeter to be precluding, let's say, the nematodes from eventually clogging that filter. So we want them to be alive. We want them to be delivered into the water. And we also don't want them to stay like in pipes for long. We want them to be quickly into the earth. And that's why mobile applications like carts are the most used equipment. In particular, if the DOSA carts are very much used, very popular for the nematode application. And by the way, if any of you is listening to this presentation in the expo, these carts are in a special. So take a benefit of that. And here you can see that the complete DOSA cart is being sold at a special pricing with discounts. So those are the 2 most important characteristics. Additionally, I want to mention a couple other things. Number 1, we don't want to have water pressure higher than 40 psi, because high water pressures can be harmful for the nematodes. And the other thing I would recommend is that the injectors are cleaned thoroughly after the use of nematodes, because otherwise there could be some sediment of the material that is being used to carry nematodes that will eventually harm or damage the injector itself. The last thing I want to mention is that normally don't run nematodes through drip lines, but mostly do it through a hand wand. That would probably be the best and more gentle way of applying them.
All right.
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say I appreciate all the information from everybody, Erica, Nick and Jose. There's a lot of good bits of information in there, and I think that would be applicable for all the different types of customers that I particularly call on. pretty easy information to take in and use. You know, to optimize, you know, BCA's, nematodes specifically in their IPM programs and things. And I know with GGS Pro, this is just a small bit of what, you know, we offer, and I'm glad we were able to cover just even, you know, just this one portion. For any customers though that are interested in learning more about some of the BCA options that we do provide, you can always reach out to your local sales rep, or you can always contact the CEA customer service team. We have extension for that, so it's 1-800-888-0054, and the extension for them is 89199. I appreciate everybody's time today. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.